I recently remembered something pretty creepy that happened when I was 16. It was during the summertime, so I would be home from school every day. I lived with my parents, and we had these next door neighbors who had one kid. He was 7 years old, and I didn't really know him that well because he wasn't in my age range. However, I would see him outside from time to time, and me and my family were friendly with his. So one day during that summer, I guess the kid's parents both had to go somewhere. So they came over the day before and asked if I could babysit. They said they would be gone for probably almost 6 hours from the morning until sometime in the afternoon. Now, I had never babysat before, but they said they would give me $50, so that made it an easy decision, and I said yes. The next day, my parents both left for their jobs, and I headed next door. The kid's name was Jacob, and before his parents left, they just gave me some basic instructions. Jacob was old enough that it wouldn't be too difficult to look after him. So after his parents left, Jacob and I started playing video games together. For a 7-year-old, he was actually really good. This continued for probably several hours. Then I remember it was interrupted by a knock on the front door. We paused the game, and I got up to go and see who was there. Jacob followed me, and when we made it near the entry of the house, I saw that there was a man outside. He was standing on the front step and had longer hair, a bit of a beard, and was just wearing a sweatshirt and sweatpants. I had no idea who he was, but after seeing him, I asked Jacob if he knew the guy. Jacob said that he didn't know who he was, but the man had come to their house several days prior. When I asked if they had answered the door for him, he said no. I was curious as to why this man was here. I told Jacob to go into the other room, and then I answered the door. When I opened it up, the man looked kind of surprised at first. Then, after saying hi, he asked if he could come inside the house. He didn't give me a reason why immediately. I said no, and then asked him why he wanted to come in. The man then said that he was there to do a free floor inspection. I told him no thanks, then I shut the door. The guy certainly came across as suspicious to me. I waited until he left the property, and also made sure that he didn't go over to my house next door. He walked to a car that was parked on the side of the road and then got inside of it. When he did, I went back over to Jacob and continued playing video games with him. A short while later, maybe like 10 or 15 minutes, we paused the game to go and make some food. When we got to the kitchen, I noticed out the front window that the man had actually not left and driven away. He was still inside of his car, which was parked in the same spot. I went closer to the window, and Jacob followed and looked out as well. When we were looking out the window, Jacob then told me that he had seen the guy also sitting in his car and seemingly watching him several days earlier. Jacob said that he had been playing outside and noticed the man watching him from his car, so he went in. When he told me this, it made me even more suspicious about the man. We continued to watch the guy from the window. Soon, though, the man seemed to notice us. He then drove off. We were glad that he was gone. I was really confused, though, as to what he was doing. For the rest of the time that I looked after Jacob that day, we did not notice the man return at all. Things went well, and his parents got back. When they did, we told him about the guy. Then I went back over to my house. Personally, I never noticed a man in the neighborhood after that. I'm guessing and hoping that he never returned. That was very suspicious, though. When I was younger, mainly in my late teens, I used to babysit. I did this for several people who lived in my neighborhood or city. One night, I was asked to babysit 2 kids for the night while the parents were out. It was going to be about 4 or 5 hours, and the kids were 5 and 3, so they were pretty young. After the parents left, I made food for the children and looked after them. For most of the night, things went really well. At about 8:30, it was time for the kids to go to bed. Their bedrooms were upstairs, so I remember telling them around that time it was time for bed. The 5-year-old boy happened to have a lot more energy than the 3-year-old Drew did. After I got them both upstairs, I made sure that they got ready for bed. The 3-year-old seemed really sleepy, and I went to her bedroom to make sure that she had gotten into bed, and then I turned the lights out. Well, I guess the 5-year-old boy wandered back downstairs in this time, because right as I was about to leave the room, I heard the back door to the house downstairs opening. Of course, I had a bad feeling about this, knowing the children were not supposed to be outside, but were supposed to be going to bed. However, I was not all that surprised with how energetic this kid was. I ran back downstairs and went over to the door. I saw the boy standing right next to it. I was relieved to see that he hadn't left. I told him that he had to go to bed now, but he said okay. So we both started walking back over to the stairs. As we were going upstairs, I asked him why he had opened up the back door. I told him that he wasn't supposed to play outside after dark. The boy then told me that you'd opened up the door to let the man in. When I heard this, I instantly had a bad feeling. I was hoping that he was just talking about an imaginary friend or something like that. After we got up the stairs, I asked him if he'd let a man into the house, and he said yes. I asked him what the man looked like. The boy only told me that he was tall. I asked him where the man went, and the boy said that he went into the living room. So I got the boy into his bedroom and had him get to bed. Then I decided to go back downstairs. I hadn't heard or seen anything. I was hoping that the boy was just using his imagination, but I didn't really think that that was the case. When I got back downstairs, most of the lights were off because I had turned them off earlier. I couldn't really see much. I carefully walked over to the living room, and then turned the light on. When I did, I didn't see anything. I called out asking if anybody was there, but it was still silent. I walked around the house very briefly, but when I did, I kind of got creeped out and I ended up pretty much just turning around and going back over to the stairs. I hadn't seen anything, but I stood there for a few moments just watching, looking around and listening. Then, I was sure that I heard a noise coming from out of my view on the other end of the house. My reaction was to quickly run up the stairs. My heart was racing, and I knew that somebody was in the house at that point. I went into the 3-year-old's room, woke her up, and then picked her up and carried her into the 5-year-old's bedroom. Then I closed the door and I got my phone and called the police. I told the police that a man was inside of the house that was not supposed to be, and I gave them the address. As we waited inside of the bedroom there in the house, I didn't really hear much of anything. But after a few minutes, I heard footsteps. This meant they had to be close to the stairs. Then I could hear the person starting to walk up the stairs. As they made their way to the top, I got really nervous. There was no lock on the door of the room that we were in. I really had no idea what I was going to do. The footsteps reached a little bit past halfway up the stairs. Then they seemed to stop and turn around. It sounded like the person was now going to the bottom of the stairs. After that, I could hear them walking away. And just about a minute after that, I heard a knocking at the front door of the house. I realized then that the police had arrived. Whoever was inside of the house must have heard that and left. I went down and answered the door and talked to the police. The parents were called and they had to come home. The kids were obviously fine. The whole thing was really crazy though. I have no idea why the man was at the back door to the house. When the boy let him in, the man that got inside must have heard me coming and went straight into the living room or something, because I hadn't seen or heard the man at all. When I got down there, I just saw the boy. I babysat for them another time, which nothing strange happened. But that will always be my craziest memory from babysitting. I started babysitting when I was in high school, mostly for family friends. But then, shortly after I started college, I wanted to earn some extra money and decided to try babysitting again. I remember that I actually put a small ad out. This was a long time ago now. So my idea of an advertisement was making a card and putting it on those tack boards that they used to have at the supermarkets. I think I went to like 3 supermarkets of where I lived at the time and put them there. It basically just had my phone number and a small picture in the corner. So literally the next day after I put them up, I got my first call from the ad. When I answered, it was a woman who was telling me that she was looking for a babysitter. I remember that she told me she was a single mother of a young 6-year-old child. She was telling me that she had to work a night shift the following day and was wondering if I would be available. She also added that she would agree to pay the rates that were on my card. I said yes right then and there. I was excited to get to earn some money. The woman then gave me her address and a time to show up the following day. So I remember the next evening I drove over there. It was kind of far from where I lived. I don't remember exactly how long it took though, but when I arrived, I noticed that it was a small house in a pretty crowded neighborhood. I walked up to the front door and then knocked on it. Pretty quickly, I was greeted by the same woman who I had talked to on the phone. She basically just said hi and then walked out of the door and said that she would pay me when she got back. Then she left. It was a really quick exchange, and she didn't really give me any instruction. So I walked inside of the house. I was in the kitchen and there was one light on, but every other light in the house appeared to be off. I did not see or hear a child anywhere and figured they must already be sleeping or something. I realized then that this was kind of weird. I knew nothing about the child other than the age, not the gender or what their bedtime was or anything. So I went into the house and it was pretty bare. There were only a few pieces of furniture in the living room. I turned on another light and then walked around the rest of the main level. There was not much else there. So then I walked upstairs, figuring that's where the bedrooms were. When I got up, there was just a hallway and several doors, all of which were closed. When I tried opening one of the doors, it was locked. I tried another, and that was also locked. I tried every door and I soon realized that they were all locked. This was extremely confusing. I then called out, asking if anybody was home. There was just silence in response. I walked back down the stairs, wondering what exactly was happening. That's when I heard a door open upstairs. I saw not a child, but a fully grown man wearing a mask covering his face. He started to go down the stairs. I ran as fast as I could for the door and went right back outside. I ran all the way to my car, and after getting back to my car, I called the police. Just after doing so, I saw the masked man leaving the property. He went down the street and quickly out of my sight. I waited there in my car until the police got there. When they did, they went inside the house and I told them everything that I knew. After a complete search, I was told that there were no children inside at all. I also found out that nobody was currently renting the house and the owners were out of town. I realized that I had probably been set up for something. The whole thing was very strange though. I still don't know what happened. But the next day, I went to the supermarkets and removed my car. This is something that happened many years ago. I was about 16 or 17, and I have a pretty large family. Many of my cousins are younger than I am, and I would occasionally babysit them. So one day, my aunt and uncle went someplace, and I was asked to watch their kids. There were 4 kids, the oldest being 9 and the youngest being 4. My aunt and uncle lived about 15 minutes away, a little bit outside of town. They had a pretty large property and several acres of land. So there was a really nice backyard with a trampoline and some other stuff. Along the edge of the backyard towards the back and sides, there were trees and a small woods. So I drove over in the afternoon, and a short time later, my aunt and uncle left. Then it was just me and the kids, and I remembered that they wanted to go outside. So we all went out into the backyard and were hanging out there. We were all outside for a couple of hours. At around the same time that it was just starting to get dark out, I noticed something on the edge of the trees. There appeared to be a man at the far back of the yard. I was sitting near the house, and he was really far away. I kept looking at him, trying to see who the guy was. It appeared as though he was mostly behind a tree, and it almost looked like he was just watching us. The longer it stayed like that, the more of a bad feeling I got about it. I called the kids, and I told them all that it was time to go inside. Like I said, it was starting to get dark anyways, so they all eventually made their way over to the back door and went in it. When we all went inside, I saw that the man was still there. After going inside, most of the kids went into the living room, and some to their bedrooms. As it got dark around, I remember checking the back window, and I saw the man walking through the yard. This time, he was not hiding behind a tree or anything. The guy walked towards the back side of the house, and I was afraid that he was going to try to get in or something. But the man then appeared to go to the side of the yard. He went out of my sight, and I looked on and off in the back for the next 10 minutes or so, but didn't see anything. I went back to hanging out with the kids and hoped that the man was gone for good. What he had been doing in the back, I really didn't know. So by now, it was obviously completely dark out. A short time later, it was time for the 4-year-old to go to bed. So I was walking with her and we passed by the front of the house. When we did, I happened to notice out the window that the man was there. He was out on the street in front, and he was walking down the side of it very slowly. I got a bad feeling, but I just kept going and went upstairs. After the youngest had gone to bed, I returned to where the other kids were. On the way back down, I looked out the window and did not see the guy. When I got back to the living room, I looked out into the backyard and didn't see him there either. I was hoping that he was just a neighbor, and that seemed like it could be a possible explanation. It was still really weird how he had been watching us though. So a little while later, there was all of a sudden a knock at the front door. I got up to go look, and I saw the same man standing there. I had a bad feeling about this. I went back and I asked the oldest kid to come with me. When he did, I asked him if the guy was a neighbor. The kid told me he wasn't. So obviously, I didn't answer the door. The guy stayed there and knocked again. The kids were all asking who was there, and I just said that someone had the wrong address. Finally, the man ended up walking away and leaving. The rest of the kids soon had to go to bed, and it was just me that was awake. I was pretty nervous that the guy would return, but thankfully he didn't. My aunt and uncle got back a while later. I told them about what happened, and then I drove home. They did not end up noticing the man after that, which I was glad to hear. I still wonder about it sometimes, though. I'm a female, and when I was a teenager, I would babysit all the time. One time in high school, I was asked to babysit for one of my mom's friends. She had two kids who were around 7 or 8. They were really easy to look after, so I enjoyed going over there and watching them. So on this one particular time, it was a pretty standard evening. It was a Friday night and the parents were going out. I arrived at their place a little bit after 5 p.m., and the parents left by 5:30. They said that they should be back home around 10 o'clock, and the kids were allowed to stay up until then if they wanted to. So after the parents left, they had left us money to call for a pizza, so we did. I remember that I put on the movie Over the Hedge and watched it with the kids. Then after the movie, they both wanted to go upstairs to their bedrooms. I remember that their rooms were really nice for 7 and 8-year-old kids. They each had a lot of toys and decorations and things that they were interested in. That made things pretty easy for me, because I no longer had to entertain them with movies. I just hung out in the living room by myself and called my best friend on the phone to chat. Well, probably an hour or so later, I heard this noise coming from outside. I was on the phone, so I didn't pay it that much attention at first. However, I remember I heard a louder noise, and I paused my phone conversation. I listened close and didn't hear anything. So then I got up and walked over to where the sound had come from. It was a window in the back of the house near the kitchen. As soon as I walked into the room, it appeared as though a person was right outside of the window. It made me stop and jump back. I then went back into the other room. I went over to the phone and I told my friend about seeing the person. As I was still saying this to her, I then heard the sound of glass breaking. I hung up the phone and darted to the staircase and ran up. I quickly went to both kids' bedrooms and told them to follow me. They did so, and the three of us went into the parents' master bedroom. I then closed and locked the door. The kids didn't know what was going on at first, but I told them that somebody had broken in. There was thankfully a phone in the bedroom. I used it to dial 911. We were all very quiet, but I couldn't tell where in the house the intruder was. After explaining what was happening to 911, I was told that police would be there in about 5 minutes. We waited and just hoped that the guy would not come upstairs. I occasionally heard things from downstairs, but couldn't really make out as to what it was. It sounded like maybe the guy was going through things in the house. Those 5 minutes or so felt like an hour while we waited. Thankfully, the intruder never went upstairs. The police arrived, and when they got to the house, they quickly apprehended the man inside. He had broken in through the back window that I had seen him at. Apparently, he was just intending to steal valuables. He had already put several items in his backpack when he was caught. I'm really glad that I noticed him when I did. I'm also glad that he didn't go upstairs. Obviously, the parents were called and had to come home. After that experience, I stopped babysitting for a while. In fact, I didn't even want to be at home by myself for a while. I was scared that something like that would happen again. Eventually, though, I was able to return to it, and I'm glad that I did.